Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, good morning. It's Dr. Gemma, and this is episode 141 of the Cognitive Podcast. Wowie kazowie! When things start to happen, they really start to happen. It's been an exciting week. Your comments are certainly welcome. You can comment on the blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com, or you can comment on our group on Ravelry. And that's exciting in itself because we've got some new things going on over on Ravelry just to keep you all caught up on events. So very exciting news, and here we go. I'm recording this on Monday morning, July 31st, 2023. So goodbye to one more July. And let's just hop right up to the warm thanks. Well, that's going to go to everybody, of course, who's supporting CFR. That is the Cognitive Fiber Retreat 2023. Lots of motion over there. First off, welcome Yarnopoly. This is the local knitting group in Santa Clarita Valley in California. I bumped into these wonderful people quite accidentally at a Starbucks. Found three people sitting there eagerly focused on their work, and then I realized I was looking at a hook. And eventually I realized all three of them were hooking. Yes, we had a bunch of crocheting people. They call themselves a fiber group. They have a Facebook page. You can find that. The link to it is a little below the warm thanks, but it is on the show notes. So I basically invited them to the podcast retreat. Of course I did. Because if they're locals, I really want them to be able to come, and they don't have to pay for a hotel if they don't want to, because they're local. And at the same time, I realize here's a group of ready-made knitters and crocheters, or in their case, maybe I should say crocheters and knitters, there to help our vendors. I mean, how much better can that get? And immediately, Cheryl, their fearless leader, handed me 3 books and said, "Do you want these for the raffle?" I said, "Of course I do." So that led to some serious changes in CFR, and I'm so grateful. I'm going to forget one. I know it's Cheryl, Mara, Senator Allison. Yes, because I am lousy on matching names to faces. So I got all their pictures with their Starbucks cups because I'm basically clever. Okay, so I'm a little full of myself today because it's been so exciting with CFR lately. So welcome to them. Also welcome to any Etsy people who are listening. I started working on the Etsy stuff full time, and I made a lot of mistakes. This is going to come up in the strategy under Little Strokes Fell Great Oaks, a statement of Ben Franklin. Thank you, Dr. Franklin. Because I was sending out this rather ghastly letter to the Etsy people that I sound terribly, terribly professional. But it doesn't sound like a retreat is going to be a lot of fun if I'm leading it based on that letter. So I've had to keep revising the letter, and every day I revise it, and I do 10 more Etsy shops to see if they would like to send us their business cards or any kind of coupon for the goodie bags. Really, it's just, again, we're back at the idea we're here to support the vendors, particularly our real-time vendors, because they got mistreated, frankly, by Stitches. And so, it is good to say the Cognitive Fiber Retreat has always been about supporting the local knitting people, including the local vendors and the indies. Because, frankly, it's really easy to stage a big, expensive function like Stitches used to be. I say that sarcastically. Of course, it's not easy. But the point is they're very visible, they're very well known, they bring in the vendors, they do it for a profit. over the years, I've watched a lot of smaller local knitters, knitting groups and knitting vendors, or fiber vendors, or spinning vendors, crocheting vendors, dyers, whatever you want to call them. I've watched them get shut out by big costs or the big guys. And so CFR has always been a reaction to that the smaller groups should be able to have get-togethers and have a lot of fun. I grant you, the prices aren't what they used to be. We're still working on it since I stopped and restarted the retreat. And also, you have to be patient, and I thank you for this in advance, because I'm relearning what I used to know. I was really shocked to find my letter from CFR, I think it was 5, which would have been about 2015, something like that. And the letter was so lively and funny and inviting to the Etsy vendors. And I thought, boy, I've really lost that. I've gotten a bit grim. So a lot of this process this year has been me rediscovering what I used to do with 8 years of practice. And thank you, everybody, for your patience. Having said that, if any of you Etsy folks are listening, because some of you said you would check it out, okay, how is that going? Well, I've written to 30 people. I've got one enthusiastic yes, a bunch of maybes, I'll go check you out. And hopefully the latest version of the letter will improve all that. Because the latest version, I'm much more upfront. What I did not realize when I started writing to the Etsy people is how much they get scammed. I had no idea the last time I did one of these in 2016. This was not the problem that it is now. So the Etsy people are being very cautious about accepting what I'm proposing. And also, I wrote that first letter badly. For the first 20 Etsy shops, I think they just got a crummy letter, so I rewrote it and sent it out again, and immediately got much more friendly response, although people are scared. So there we go. I want to point out, if anybody sends us their media, any of the Etsy people, business cards, coupons, gifts, whatever, to be raffled, of course, not to me, thank you. If anybody does that, of course, they're a friend of the podcast, and I will carry them in the resources list on the show notes and also on the information thread on the Ravelry group. So you as listeners will always be able to find them again. If you see something you really like, I want you to be able to find it in real time when you're not hanging out at the podcast. I want you to have a chance to do that. So there we go. Meanwhile, somebody kind of cautiously said, hey, Gemma, we're getting sick of listening to you go on about people paying. And that resulted in a few changes over the last 2 weeks. It's taken me a while to figure that one out. Because while I sympathize with that, I also have to collect the payments. And nobody is holding out. I mean, I don't think it's me giving guilt here. I think it's just more people forget, or they think, did I pay already, and whatever. So, having said that, I took the list of people's names for the retreat. I took it off the show notes page. What I did do was I moved it to an information thread on our Ravelry group. The link is in the show notes. So now in the show notes, under Warm Thanks, you see Cognitive Fiber Retreat, and in capitals, all info is right here. And here is a link. And it takes you to the information thread on Ravelry. And that's where I'm keeping track of who has paid and what's going on, all the information. I did leave some of it on the show notes because I think if you happen on the show notes, I want you to know how to get to everything you need to know. So you do have a section called But in Brief, and it's the date, the cost, how to pay, the last day to pay. The last day to pay the attendance fee is September 1st, or you could get bumped. So far, not a lot of risk of that, but I hope people are going to pay. It's not a pay at the door. I cannot collect money on the day of CFR. It is just too intense for me to be involved in that, and I don't want to be walking around with pockets full of cash. Okay. I also left the vendors up with their links so that everybody is aware who's coming, and I left a picture of Dizzy Blonde Studios' beautiful colorway, which reminds me to say, hey, Laser Sheep, I think, if you guys are going to do a colorway, please ship me a picture. I want to be able to put a picture up and promote it. But anyway, there is the Sea Glass colorway photo, reduced in size somewhat, and it's by Dizzy Blonde. And I mentioned that Brenda Castile is working with her. Brenda's going to create a unique shawl pattern to go with the Sea Glass colorway. And they're looking at doing this in kits with shawl yarn and a pattern bag. So this is pretty exciting. Meanwhile, the mini skein swaps, I put all that information about the possible patterns and different techniques you can use. That's over on the Ravelry info thread. On that Ravelry thread, the information thread, it's not all in the first post. You have to scroll down to see the various aspects of the retreat. The goodie bags, as I said, I've been doing 10 per day, 10 letters to people on Etsy. It's because the system of cutting and pasting the letter into the shop's contact seller link has been a little complicated. So I can do about 10 of these before I start going out of my mind. But also it was a way to field test my letter, which was lousy. And I've had to revise so many times till I finally found my old letter and said, wow, that's way better. Classes, we are still looking at that. That is still an open issue. Are we going to have classes or demos? I know we will have demos. I know there will be just ad hoc, extempore, in the moment things where people will say, how are you doing that? And other people will show them. So we know there will be demos, but will we have organized classes? I don't know. If we do, we're going to have to do it probably in people's rooms, and that's just fine. Okay, and then you'll be happy to know I took all my resources and I lowered them on the page. They are now at the end of the page. You will notice that we have one Etsy store added to the resources, King's Creations. I'm very excited about that because they wrote back immediately and said, we would love to do this. Are you a scammer? They said it a little more politically than I just said it. But I was so relieved because that's where I realized why all the Etsy people are a little bit frightened of me and are not being very warm and receptive. So thank you, King's Creations. You made me change my Etsy letter and made me realize, like, wow, no wonder everybody was being so frightened. So hopefully we'll get some more positive on that. But I did want to give you the link to King's Creations immediately. They do 3D printing. Okay, here is something I hadn't gone to. They're sending us yarn bowls. Yes, people are 3D printing yarn bowls. That knocked me for a complete loop. Now I know people are 3D printing bobbins for different e-spinners and various pieces of equipment. And our own Alpenglow is the queen of the equipment 3D printing from what I can see. She's doing Swifts and such. So I don't want to compete with her too much. I really want to give Carrie room to be the person on the spot with the great stuff. And it's important. The people who come to us in real time, we always try to really promote them hard because they're sitting there in the room with us and we'd like them to come back, you know. But anyway, what shocked me was I don't believe I have anybody doing 3D bowls. So that's very exciting. I still have to plumb the depths of Ravelry for stitch markers and drop spindles. And I am here to tell you right now, if people don't know how to drop spindle, I will recommend spindles to you and get your buns into the retreat. I will teach you how to drop spindle. It's not that hard. You can learn it. Some people pick it up within 5 minutes. I remember, I think it was Mary, Knit Admin. I don't remember if she's Knit Admin or Data Knitter. I think she's Knit Admin. Mary just picked up a spindle, dropped it, and away she went, which really got to me because it was a grueling process for me. But we can teach you usually in about half an hour, or we can at least get you started on the way. Okay, so we know we're going to have some classes and some demos, and we've got some new exciting links this week to Yarnopoly and to King's Creations on Etsy, so I'm pretty happy. What, you may say, is going on? This was supposed to be a knitting, etc. podcast. Yes, let's get on to what's on my hooks and needles, shall we? Well, nothing finished, but a lot of good progress. The Stash Toss, which is yarn I have bought versus yarn I have used since January 1st, 2023. That is, I have to have started using the skein January 1st or later. Nothing from last year. Oh, that hurts, believe me, particularly on the Lane Splitter and the Lady Eleanor. Oh, that hurts. But at any rate, the Stash Toss 2023, 8 skeins in, 42 out. I'm pretty happy about that. The Lane Splitter, I am back in business. The Lane Splitter is not the most exciting project because it's just a big rectangle, but it's got a great pattern. is a very, very smart pattern. And I started looking at it and said, that's going to come out a little long. Now, typically what you do is you knit with cotton yarn a waistband. Sure, I have the cotton yarn and everything. I think this is going to be way too long if I do that. In the waistband, you put 2-inch elastic, another thing I didn't have. So I had to make a Joann's run, and I also had to think this out. So, if I don't do the cotton waistband, I'm going to need a liner. And I am pretty sure at this point I'm not going to do the cotton waistband. I think the lane splitter is just a little too long and it's going to look a little too bizarre because it's kind of curvaceously fitted. And I think if it goes too far below your knees, it looks a little silly with that very flattering fit on the hips and rump. So anyway, I'm thinking, all right, a lot of people don't do the waistband. What they do is they turn over the upper edge of the lane splitter itself. Now this, in my case, is done in Noro, I think it's Silk Guard, and a lot of people do it in Corian. So that is not going to be real comfortable against the waist. It is a relatively loosely knit fabric, which is fine because I'll never wear it with anything under it except dark leggings. But it would be very itchy as a waistband. And so, anything's an excuse. I went over to Joann Fabrics and I looked at jelly rolls and realized my waistband's going to come in to fewer than 40 inches. The jelly roll pieces are 2.5 inches wide and they are 42 inches. So I thought, one jelly roll strip in this would be an excellent liner. So I think the plan here is to stitch it along the upper top edge, probably by my sewing machine, but you can do it by hand as well. She gives you instructions in the pattern to do a whip stitch. And I will probably turn the edge over 2.5 inches and then line it and put the elastic between the two layers of the actual knitted fabric. So on the inside I will have a layer of the knitted fabric with a layer of the jelly roll liner. If you don't know what a jelly roll is, it is a long strip of quilting fabric, cotton. And it's used in quilting. It basically pre-cut strips. You buy them, there's usually 5 coordinated colors in a jelly roll. And you can just unwind it and use it to make the strips on your quilts. And it saves you a lot of cutting time. And it also saves you fabric matching time. And they're typically on sale at Joann Fabrics. So anyway, I went in and I found a jelly roll with just perfect colors. You can see it in the show notes. And you can also see the almost finished lane splitter main fabric that I'm just doing the body of the skirt right now as I think about the waistband. So, there's a few ways I could do this. I could not turn the skirt, but I would still line it with the cotton fabric. I can turn it over 2.5 inches. That would give me a waistband that would be 2 thicknesses of the skirt plus a thin thickness of the cotton. And that would just reinforce the waistband a bit, which I really, really like, with the idea of strengthening it because you're going to put 2-inch elastic. That's going to rub, that's going to weaken the waistband. Another option, take 2 of the jelly roll strips and sew them on so that they are on the inside of the wool fabric so that the waistband elastic is actually only in contact with that solid cotton as opposed to rubbing against the knitted fabric, which I'm afraid would give way faster than a solid high thread count quilting cotton. So stay tuned. I hope I haven't just put everybody to sleep. But that's what's going on there. And of course, oh look, extra fabric for my stash. Heavens, what shall I do with it? I'll figure out something. What a tragedy. Meanwhile, Minerva's Meow socks are going so pathetically slowly. I'm on the second sock and I'm on the foot. And of course I knit these things top down. So you'd think this would go lickety-split. My foot's only 5 3/4 inches, but it's not, because when I'm home, I'm really cranking away on the lane splitter skirt. And the more I see it, the more I like it, the more I wrap it around myself. Now, keep in mind, if you're going to make a lane splitter, by the way, you have to fit it over your hips, not your waist. The elastic's going to pull it in at the waist, and probably it's going to be under a top anyway. The waistband will be hidden Most people seem to be wearing it that way. But as you're working on this, do not panic if you're making this much bigger skirt than you think you need, because it's about your hips and fitting it over your hips and your bum, not just fitting it at your waist. That's what the elastic waistband is going to handle. Anyway, Minerva's Meow Socks, going really, really slowly. Pennsylvania Dutch embroidery dead stop. But hopefully that is the next thing. As you can tell, I'm killing myself not to start the new projects that I have in mind, and those new projects will involve yarn from our vendors. So I can't get there yet. I really want to get through this stuff. And it's also tough because I'm not making anything for Sunny Bank this year, because I'm not going, and frankly, one of them learned how to needle felt and is doing phenomenal needle felting collies 3D. So they don't need anything by me. They're doing good. So there's that. Meanwhile, yes, I did get new fabric. The beloved did give me a gift certificate to Joann's for our anniversary. So, I went over there and got some needful things, though. Really am happy. I got a wrist pin cushion, one of those things I've wanted forever and just never have made or bought. So hopefully I'll be reviewing that pretty soon. And meanwhile, I'm winding yarn. I do have the yarn cakes wound for my next projects, which I believe is going to be a shawl from the Oink Pigments yarn, and I believe some winter middies crocheted from the insanely wonderful Laser Sheep BB-8 yarn. So stay tuned for that. Dizzy Blondes, no, haven't done a thing. I have a huge pile up of Minerva fur on my desk that I haven't gotten to because I filled one drop spindle with it, and that is the next project. I think I'm going to blend that with a wool. I think by blending in this case, I don't have a drum carder, so I think what I'm going to do is ply it against a very nice wool, and I've got a nice collection of that. Cat fur and wool should be a pretty warm yarn. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm kind of excited about that. But I just don't have the bandwidth or the time to do spinning right now. So those of you who did Tour de Fleece, well done you. Having said that, let us move on to the strategy. The strategy is Ben Franklin, Little Strokes Fell Great Oaks. Why am I telling you this? Because this is popping up all over my radar this week. It is an interesting thing to know who you are and how you work. And it matters a lot if you're in a project-oriented kind of lifestyle like I am in. But it also matters if you'd like not to strangle your husband, if you have a different style than he has, and if you need to understand what other people are doing. Ben Franklin, back in Poor Richard's Almanac in 60-something, Franklin made this comment in the guise of Poor Richard, who gave out simple wisdom in these newspaper columns he wrote for many years, something like 12 years. Franklin gave out these little pearls of wisdom because people were not thinking this way. So we talk about this cliche as though, everybody knows this, do it a little bit at a time, blah, blah, blah. But it's interesting to me that in the 18th century, Franklin felt he had to remind people of this. Here I sit in the 21st century doing the same thing. That if you have big projects, you have to look at this in terms of a bit at a time. Now, I was interested because Andrea Nelson, on her Teachables class and on her Instagram, this is the one who does the really easy watercolor projects to encourage people to take up watercolor. She finally put up a reel about, hey guys, I make this look easy, but I make a lot of mistakes. I do a lot of preliminary test projects before I mount anything here. So you're just seeing a very finished product, but she reduces her finished products to extremely small, extremely simple steps. And she just did a whole reel on Little Strokes Fell Great Oaks. In her case, it was, I designed this flower you could paint, but it took me like 8 preliminary versions of it to get it to a place where I could make it available as a simple project on a reel. And she said, why do I make it look so easy? She said, I've been practicing this for years. Now, I did sign up for her class on Teachable. And one of the first things she does is she tells you how long she's been working at this. which I think is something like since 2018 or something. So she's been doing this for like 5 years at least. I may be getting that wrong. The important thing is, in that reel she says, there was a moment where she realized life was getting in the way. She wanted to be an artist. And she said, there was a moment where I realized I had to commit to watercolor every day if I wanted to create saleable stuff. And she talks about wasting paper, using cheap paper to do experiments, all sorts of things. Okay, little strokes fell great oaks. There's another thing you need to know, and that is, I think it's Malcolm Gladwell who came up with the idea that it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill. What does that mean? Well, let's do some math. I'm a clinical psychologist, you all know this. We have to do, after graduate school, 3,000 hours documented clinical training with real people before we can sit for our licensing exam. Why is that? Because you don't want to take somebody for whom it's all theory in grad school and just plunk them down unsupervised with patients who have real problems. We have to practice. 3,000 hours of practice. What does that mean? Slightly over 2 years full time. So 10,000 hours, do the math, what that's going to be like full time. You're talking 6.5, 7 full-time years to achieve mastery. I don't think that's true of everything, but I think it's a useful guideline. By the way, how did that work for me? I will tell you, I got licensed. I had been a paraprofessional from 1981 to 96, off and on. Then I became a professional in 96. When I saw my first patients as a grad student, I got licensed. I was first in my class to finish and get licensed. I got licensed in 2002. I did my 3,000 hours marching straight through. In 2002, you say, well, isn't that really like 6 years of professionalism? I didn't feel professional. If you count my paraprofessional, I still didn't feel professional. I think I felt really competent when I hit about the 10 years of licensure mark. When was I licensed? 2002. So, it takes a while. I mean, some skills are very challenging to gain. Now, I don't think knitting is like that, but I think you have to be real that when you're doing knitting, when you're doing crocheting, when you're learning to dye or to weave or to spin, you have to realize that this is a long and gradual process that can take you down a lot of rabbit holes, and there's a lot of knowledge accumulated there. In the case of the fiber arts, over millennia. So there's a lot there to learn. You can be a really good knitter, for example, still not know how to do entrelac, or still not know how to do stranded knitting. I've certainly seen that one. So remember, you have to chip away at this a little bit at a time. Now, as a quilter, and as, of all things, a writer, I learned to love the process. You have to learn to embrace your learning steps and your mistakes. Quilting taught me this. Quilting, takes forever. I mean, you buy fabric, you got this heap of different colored fabrics, you think, oh, now what? Well, now you throw it in the laundry. You wash it, you iron it, you starch the living heck out of it, and you admire it. Oh, isn't it pretty? I'm so glad I bought this. So, the next step, you're laying it out and you're cutting, if you're me, you're cutting strips or squares. And you have to take those little boogers when you finish them and hold them in your hand and say, look at my beautiful strip. And then you have to be able to hold it up against the other strips and go, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Look at all the combinations. Okay, you have to learn to love process. Little strokes fell great oaks. Now, in the crafting world, we look at process versus product. I've heard this applied to knitting more than anything else. A process knitter is someone who works on one project and just loves it to pieces and doesn't get distracted. They do it beginning to end, buying just enough yarn. Yeah, I'm not one of those. A product knitter likes to get a lot of things finished. That's me. So I tend to have a few projects going so that every now and then I can turn around and zip through finishing one and feel like I got a finished object. Now, I have my limits. I can't have a whole lot of projects going. I prefer to have, I think, 4 to 6 projects going, because I don't want to lose track of any of them. I've had a few I've let go for a few years, and I just hate that. So you have to find out where you are on that spectrum. But you do have to remember, little strokes fell great oaks. This also heightens the importance of the individual steps. Remember when I was talking about the Japanese philosophies a few episodes back? about how you do things and concepts that are unique to that culture that we don't have words for in English. And part of that is this idea of cherishing small steps, taking your time. And of course, in the background, some of you are chanting, Gemma, that's mindfulness. Yes. That when you go by little strokes, fell great oaks, you begin to love the steps. You begin to craft each step, to love each step, and be good to it. You can hear this in knitting and crochet when someone says things like, rip it back, frog it. If you don't like it now, you're not going to like it when it's finished. That is the ultimate in this logic. That you realize your little strokes are adding up into something you don't like. Stop now, because the more you complete, the worse you're going to feel. There's also an addendum to this, and that's in terms of, what about the people who don't do this? Yeah, my husband can't really do this. My husband has to do one project, and he has to sit there and do it for hours. So just forget cleaning the house. My husband lets the house turn into a pigsty, and then he will spend hours, and he will make it so clean. This makes me insane. I believe in just doing a little bit of tidying and picking up every day, and then I do the major projects on the weekend, and they're not that major because I've been tidying and picking up. So you do have to deal with the fact not everybody works this way, and when you encounter them, particularly if you're managing them professionally or in the home, like your kids or your spouse. Yes, you're managing your spouse. Don't tell them I said that, or her. Okay, if you're dealing with that, you do have to respect that not everybody can work this way. Not everybody has the focus. If somebody has ADHD, if they're a little bit on the autism spectrum, this is going to be really hard for them because they tend to work in big project, just spend the whole day doing the big project, exhaust themselves. You can tell I don't like that concept. Okay, so do keep this in mind, that if you are working this way, you are going to encounter people who don't, and you do have to acknowledge they get things done. What you will notice, they're not craftspeople. Craftspeople really get it. People who are doing craft work for money really get little strokes, fell great oaks. And when you're working this way, it's going to teach you a lot about who you are and what your style is. And that's really valuable because then you can take it into the bigger field of your entire life and work with it that way. So all my projects, in my professional life, in my crafts, in my now art, they're all based on little strokes, fell great oaks, and I offer it to you. Ben Franklin, the guy, knew what he was talking about. The fluffy books, not much. I'm now in the last Bridgerton book, that is the series of 8 books that basically involve the courtship and romance of the Bridgerton kids, the fictional eightsome, with their fabulous mother Violet. And this is the thing Netflix made the series from. Yes, I am looking forward to year 3 of the Netflix series. Although they are switching, they're using book 4 instead of book 3 because they build up so much suspense there, they had to. But remember, the Bridgerton books are not the TV series, so not as focused on race issues. There are issues of class and gender, and they do talk as if they are all in the 21st century wearing Regency gowns. It's kind of interesting. But they're a lot of fun. Do let me warn you, some spicy scenes. I don't really enjoy spicy scenes in romance novels, if you can believe this. These are pretty well written. I gotta say, she does a good job with it. So the Bridgerton books, a lot of fun. Julia Quinn is the author. You know, in all the usual places you can buy them. I bought them in sets. There were 3 sets that are collections of the first 8 books. And then number 3 has an additional book tossed in, one of the prologue books. She has some preamble books that she wrote after she finished the original 8. So that's what I'm reading. And it's really about it. I'm not watching anything exciting on the telly right now. I don't have normal television, but I stream Netflix and I stream BritBox. Nothing really great going on there for me. Something I really like. Oh, yes. Well, first of all, I'm going to say, I put these in reverse order, but Yarnopoly of SCV, I have a link to their Facebook page there. This is Santa Clarita's own local fiber group. They meet about once a month at a Starbucks from what I can see, but they have a Facebook page. They are the nicest bunch of people, and welcoming and funny and interesting and a good variety of ages. And you bet I want them at the Cognitive Fiber Retreat. I'm not even going to pretend, because I want more of our locals tied in. And it was really awkward because they kept saying, do you know this person? Do you know that person? And I should have. I did know one who used to work in the local LYS, but I should have known them. And I thought, it's so weird. I've been buzzing between the Antelope Valley and the Santa Clarita Valley all these years as a knitter. And it's the first encounter I've had with Santa Clarita people doing this. And again, as I approached the table, they were all crocheting. It made me so happy. So anyway, yes, something I really like, Yarnopoly. The other thing I really like, the United States Department of Transportation has a page on airlines and what they owe you if they bounce you off a plane or if they do things wrong. I like this. Pete Buttigieg, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, he's the secretary, and in Biden's cabinet. And I really love that he noticed that all these people on TikTok and Instagram were sharing information, lawyers and whatnot, on what to do if you get bounced from an airline. And Buttigieg just finally said, yup, and published a page. I give you one page, but it's actually a website on everything you can know from the Department of Transportation. So I've given you the link in the show notes. But at last, a government web page that is clear, interesting, easy, and supports us, the taxpayers. There it is. So I really like that. Put a lid on it. Of course, I continue with the tea tastings, and today I should have refills coming in, and I'm very happy about that. Now, I think I mentioned, but if I didn't, I'm going to say it here. I am about to start following Snarky Teas because they're woman-owned, and they also say no sugar added, no sweeteners, nothing to sweeten their teas except natural ingredients. This, of course, is why I love Plum Deluxe. So that's good news. This week I tried the Tranquil Peach Herbal. I just stuck it right in my iced tea filter, which I'll talk about some other time. Is a long cone that you just drop in a mason jar, a quart or gallon mason jar. Anyway, I tried the Tranquil Peach Herbal. Glory, hallelujah, this stuff is fabulous. This is the iced tea. I was pretty excited by the pears and cinnamon, which is fabulous as well, and has become a house iced tea. The Tranquil Peach Herbal is also now a house iced tea. I'm getting a refill today. Simply love it. It's so good. It's so good. So nothing but praise for this. This is green rooibos tea. I don't know what that actually is, but no caffeine. That's all I care about. Then regular rooibos tea, apple pieces, pineapple pieces, rose hips, chamomile, lemon verbena, calendula, star cornflowers, and peach pineapple essence. So, yeah, there are things in there like pineapple that will make it sweeter. But, oh, this stuff is good. I'm assuming peach and pineapple essence, whenever they say vanilla essence, peach pineapple essence, those are usually prepared by soaking fruits in alcohol. So that is a form of sweetener, but hey, it's not straight up sucrose. So, do beware, but I'm not as worried because at least this is somewhat more natural than stuffing sugar into it or soaking the tea bags in sugar or soaking the loose tea in sugar. So there we go. Another winner from Plum Deluxe, and I can't wait for that package to arrive. In the blather, the pup date, nothing much. We're still working on Queenie's indoor skills. Her biggest issue is when she was a puppy, she figured out that if she greeted us with hysteria, we thought it was cute. Well, it was until she weighed 70 pounds. So we're working on just meeting her with calm. When she starts jumping, the trick is to look at the ceiling and raise your hands. Don't make any eye contact. Do not touch her. She immediately stops, gets confused. When you reward her with eye contact, she starts up. You have to stop. You have to keep doing it. She's getting it. But again, she's very smart and very stubborn. So like Eleanor before her, Queenie sees the world as totally malleable to her will. Captain is fabulous. Captain is lying around the house even as we speak. She's very calm. She stopped chewing a long time ago. She's a great indoor dog now. Meanwhile, on the watercolors, I started taking Andrea Nelson's Teachable class. There is a link in the show notes. I took her first one, I think it's 45, Intro to Watercolor. And thereby hangs a bit of a tale. Her introductory material is great. Then she does a lesson where you just take a plain piece of watercolor paper and you experiment with your brush, making shapes and just trying over and over again to water down your paint. Yeah. That was really great, but I wasn't ready to do it. I thought, oh, that's 5 minutes and it's not going to work for me because I really need to apply my knowledge immediately. So what I did was I decided to paint the landscape outside my study window. So I kept trying to sketch what the outlines of the mountains were. I came up with a passable sketch. I took all the buildings out of it, and then I transferred that to watercolor paper. That is, I just freehanded it, and I also took a picture out my window, which is a slightly different angle than what I started with. But you can see the original picture with my barn in it, and then you can see my setup, the top left picture. I wanted you to see what does it take to do this. So you can see a black plastic old junk cup. So those are my brushes in their cup. You can see 2 water jars. I'm just using old mason jars and a spray bottle to keep the paints wet. And then you can see my kids' 8 paint set that I found sitting in a drawer, and just a towel as just a cloth in case I need it. On the far left, you can see there's a board underneath it all. It's a sort of clipboard that you use, and there's tape on it to hold the picture down from warping. And on the left of that, you can see I got these little cheap plastic paint palettes from Joann's. I think you get 5 for like $6 or something. And you can see what Andrea Nelson actually wanted me to do. You can see that card where I am sampling paint. But I had a lot more fun when I was sampling paint, using it to make an easy watercolor, I thought. And I did it in layers. So I started at the very bottom with very simple brown and yellow and began adding things to it. The more I looked at my photo, the more I saw. I haven't got the sky in. The picture you see is the most finished version right now as I record this. And what happened was I fell in love with the browns, which I never thought I would. And so you can see on my sample card, which I did a close-up of, all the experiments in color I was doing, including how to make dots, how to get different effects. It's really very fun. What you can't see is the card is now covered in blue because I'm trying to figure out how to do that sky with the more intense blue at the top, because the blue I have is very green blue. I did find I could coat it with purple and get the blue I want. So that's the next part, and I need to work a little bit more on the background hills on the left, not the very back, the mid-level, because I want to give it a little more effect. But I had a lot of fun. I do recommend this class. I've taken the introductory lectures, which are just her talking about what you need and who she is. And then I did one 7-minute class on that card, on trying brush effects. And I'm going to go back and watch it again, probably today, and then move on to the next class, because with one class, I'm having so much fun, and it was only 7 minutes, if you can believe it. So I am loving this, and thank you those of you who have made kind comments on the various social media outlets. The Hub State, we're still working on the garden, and the rabbits did get to my Shasta daisy, so that's a failed experiment. However, we had our 31st anniversary, and of course he brought me roses, and was fabulous sushi, and there's a picture of the beautiful roses, which are now looking horrible in the 100-degree heat in our house, but nonetheless, it was a fantastic, quiet 31st anniversary. I am still on the prowl with my Plant ID app, picture this, and I still have the links for Farmers Defense and Great Garden Plants. Next year, I plant much earlier. On the calendar, of course, the Cognitive Fiber Retreat on Saturday, November 11th, 2023. It's coming, and it's coming fast. Please get your payments in by September 1st so I can start buying us things. And then again, the Evolution of Psychotherapy Conference is in Anaheim at the Convention Center right on top of Disneyland, December 12th through 17th of 2023. You can see my alter ego, the Blonde Knitting Dragon, and you can also see my happy announcement that I'm living for beginning September 11th. I work Monday through Fridays, really beginning September 1st, which means I get the Labor Day holiday, so I'm looking forward to that. So there we go. Anything else? Yes. Yes, Minerva gets a very special last word this time. Her last word is purr. You can see a picture of her purring as I scratch under her chin. And you can see from her face, she's in that blissed out state that cats go into. Why is Minerva purring? Because I was just scrolling around on Facebook and my friend Terry posted the image you will see there, a saying from Ricardo Sanchez. The devil knows your name but calls you by your sin. God knows your sin but calls you by your name. Why would I put that up there? Ricardo Sanchez was the state poet laureate, I believe, of New Mexico. I don't know if it was New Mexico or Arizona. Ricardo was mi compañero at Washington State University. We were junior faculty together. So Ricardo and I were the ones who went to faculty meetings, and we were the exciting young faculty. I think he was probably in his 50s and I was in my 30s. And we were always proposing new stuff, and we were always talking about really exciting changes we could make. And we had a very senior faculty. I was by far the youngest in that faculty at the time. And so we didn't get too many changes through. But we would walk out, and Ricardo would sort of, squeeze my hand or put his arm around my shoulder and say, "Oh, compañera, why don't they understand?" He was just a wonderful, wonderful man. He had a very interesting life. He went to prison as a teenager because I think he was driving in a gang killing. He didn't realize what was going on, but he was in the gang and somebody had to drive. He was also too young to drive. He spent time in prison where he sorted himself out. And he became a poet, and a beautiful, beautiful poet. One of the best I've ever read. His love poetry just floors me. He developed stomach cancer shortly before I gave up being a professor, and he died shortly after I stopped teaching. And it was a great man too soon. He really had a lot of anger at the prison system. He really felt that they said they were rehabilitating and they weren't. And he felt as though his life had been taken from him when he made a foolish mistake as a young man living in a world full of gangs that he couldn't have avoided. I can't and I don't want to judge all that. What I want to say is Ricardo really remade himself into a sensitive, compassionate, and brilliant person and poet, and I will always miss him. And to see his work floating around on the internet has been choking me up for the last 4 days. So, mi compañero, this one is for you. I will always miss you, and I'm so grateful that my friend Terry posted this. I told her what it was and who he was, and she was really happy about that too. And Minerva and I together, we are purring to see our beloved friend memorialized in this strange way that the internet has. So, on that happy note, everybody... Oh, by the way, if you go below Minerva's Purr, you're going to see my favorite resources. I did move it all down there. You will also see, as I said earlier, that I've added King's Creation on Etsy and Yarnopoly of the SCV. I've added their links at the bottom too. I have a feeling that is always going to grow, that list. And I think it's kind of important because I don't do advertising. I don't take money for ads. And I think it's important then that when I put something down, I must really like it. Will you like it? I hope so. So meanwhile, as we head excitedly towards the end of the summer, when the heat gets the most intense here in Southern California, we are also rushing towards the 9th Cognitive Fiber Retreat, CFR 2023. And I'm working on other projects, including trying to develop a graphic because, like somebody has a button making machine, I'm just saying, not saying any names. So I'm trying to come up with a little graphic that maybe we can get on buttons in the goodie bags. It'd be very, very exciting. So, having said all this, everybody remember too, it will be November. We don't know where COVID will be. You might need to be bringing masks. Please do everything else. Please get your flu shot, get your RSV shot if you're in my age category. Do all the things you have to do to be safe because we will be in a group for at least one full day, but if it works like other CFRs, Friday afternoon through Sunday afternoon. So please remember, get all your shots, do all those things, have a mask handy. There are no requirements for masks at this time. So let's all just be happy for that. In the meantime, what I'm really telling you, remember, we are a community. That is the great thing that crafting does. It brings us together. So the more we care for others, the more we protect ourselves. The more we protect ourselves, the more we are caring for others. So with that in mind, everybody stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.